Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. And I am very happy to bring you today. Attorney Brian Jones owns a criminal defense firm out of Ohio, and he is here with us today to talk about the Joe Biden sexual accusations that just came up in the news. And so, thank you so much for joining us today, Brian.
Hey, Erica. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I cannot wait to get your insights on the latest in the news today. So let's open up with talking about just the levels of sex crimes. I know you've gone over that before in great detail, but to understand what these accusations mean, I think it's a really good thing to review before we go in depth on the topic.
Absolutely, Erica. So, sex crimes fall into a variety of categories. Most everybody knows the charge of rape, but rape in and of itself isn't the only sex crime that there is in most states' statutory codes. There's also crimes that involve the mere touching of an individual without consent. And there's also a crime in Ohio called sexual battery that relates to having even consensual intercourse or sexual contact between two people that have a power disparity. So the statute particularly criminalizes sexual contact between a student and a teacher, even if that student is overage, or a corrections officer and an inmate. And again, even if these relationships are consensual, the Ohio Revised Code criminalizes that sort of conduct because of the power disparity. So there are a variety of sexual acts and sexual interactions that can be criminalized depending on your jurisdiction.
Wow, that's really very interesting. So if you are a powerful person, you may be believed to have done something that maybe you didn't do just because you have the power and possibly someone felt like they had to do what you said.
That's right, Erica. Now, for a civil suit, that's all that would need to be present. Under the Ohio Revised Code, the specific relationships that the Ohio Revised Code prohibits have to be in place. So our topic today about Joe Biden would likely not fall under a criminal version of that statute, just on the mere fact that he was her boss. The consent issue is what's making the Joe Biden issue become potentially criminal.
Wow, that's so interesting. So we'll talk about contemporary disclosures in past accusations as a metric of proof. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how that relates to this case?
Absolutely. So in this case, the accuser, Tara Reid, has made allegations that occurred about 26 years ago, back in 1993. And the interesting thing about that, in light of this delayed disclosure, is that a substantial number of her supporters claim her allegations are believable because she says she told some friends and family members at the time of the allegation. Now, this is very similar to the accusers of Brett Kavanaugh, now Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, and President Donald Trump. The fact that another person was told of the allegation raises the specter of believability, but is a statement more credible simply because it's shared with other people at the same time that it's made. If you want to believe this, it requires that we eliminate the possibility that someone can intentionally or even unintentionally magnify, alter, or straight up manipulate their own perspective of events once they've reflected upon them for a period of time. Now, this is supported by substantial and ample research about the fallacy of eyewitness identification. If I were to put it in an analogy, if I were to tell you today that I saw a green sky last year, and in fact, I had gone around to all of my friends at that time and said, the sky is green, the sky is green. Does that make it any more or less true simply because I told people a year ago that it was the case, even if none of them perceive it and witnessed it for themselves? And I think when we're talking about criminal allegations, we have to be really worried and concerned about increasing a witness's believability or an accuser's believability simply because they told other people about the allegation.
That is a really interesting point that you make. I mean, I can see where that, your point about the sky being green. I mean, that is fantastic. And I don't know that it would make it any more believable just because it happened 25, 26 years ago. Um, Except that, unless somebody corroborates her story or saw the thing happen. I mean, it's definitely hazy. Now, you had mentioned something about when somebody is recalling this, if they're lying, in fact, they could come up with a very detailed and emotional account, even if it didn't happen.
That's exactly true, Erica. And when we're talking about an allegation like this, an allegation against a highly public figure, and an allegation that has potential political implications, and an allegation that is delayed 26 years, uh, Tara Reade has had 26 years to come up with the details of that allegation. So while many people point to Tara Reade's allegations and say, well, there's so much detail involved. She remembers the hallway. She remembers the location. She remembers specific things that Senator Biden, former Vice President Biden, said and did. Does that make it any more believable that she has these extreme details, even though she's had all this time to come up with those details? What I've experienced in my practice is that true or false allegations can have widely varying levels of detail in them. I've seen false allegations that have very vague stories attached to them. I've seen true allegations that have had very vague stories attached to them. And likewise, I've seen false allegations that have great and explicit detail and emotional context to them, even though we were able to prove by other means that they were not in fact true. I think one of the interesting things about this case, to kind of piggyback on this issue of truthfulness and believability, is the reporting done by the New York Times in their recent episode of The Daily. I believe it was aired on April 14th. Now, the New York Times had done some investigation of these allegations, and one of Tara Reade's statements in support of her allegations is that she made these reports formally to a committee inside the Senate. But the reality is that none of those records exist. Most of her colleagues that she was monitoring and managing interns at that time don't remember her making these allegations. There's no records verifying that she made this investigative report and made a request for an investigation of this incident. So the objective evidence that should be there, that she claims should be there, isn't. So what she's doing is she's bolstering her allegation with elaborate and flowery detail, and this claim that she had made the claim to her friends and family, who obviously have justification and reason to support her even today.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about the reasons why she would do this now? I mean, that's what makes it seem a little bit sketchy to me, is that, it has been 26 years. Why would you come forward now? It's been a long time. Like you said, she's had plenty of time to think about it. And, is it a political move with this timing? Is it, right when we find out that he's most likely going to be the Democratic candidate in the upcoming election? There's some interesting facts about how much she loves Russia and Putin. I don't even know. That feels like it came out of left field. But, so it's all very interesting. And I guess it just goes to prove that people do have reasons to lie, whether this is the case here or not. They do come up with things and to reasons to lie in these cases. So what are your thoughts on the timing?
Well, my thoughts on the timing are that it's convenient. This is a good time to bring those allegations out. What is her motive on this? Erica, let me put it to you this way. I love steak. And if I've got a big juicy ribeye, I don't need to add mushrooms and onions and a hollandaise sauce to it, I've still got a ribeye. And when we're talking about false allegations, we want to look at hard proof, hard evidence that should be there, evidence that's not present, and conflicts in stories. Motive is like those sauteed onions and mushrooms, and maybe the brown butter and the herbs that are often garnishes on what is really a very solid meal in and of itself.
I see. So all the details and the timing and everything that's just that makes it less believable than had she just come forward when it happened 26 years ago and dealt with it then, or any time before within the last year or so.
Exactly, Erica. I mean, when we think about the fact that Vice President Biden was in fact vice president, and he was elected not once but twice, so he was already once in the national spotlight, but not at the high degree that he is today. I don't have any evidence that Tara Reade is connected to Russia or has some affinity to Russia, but it is an interesting angle that there are individuals who seem to be making this connection. When we're talking about these delayed disclosures, the motive for bringing it up when it's brought up is always very interesting. Now, I don't personally know the timeline, the statute of limitations for the District of Columbia. What I know in Ohio is that the statute of limitations for these offenses is 25 years. So the interesting thing about the timing of this Reed's allegation is that at this point, it will never be brought before a court of law, and never be judged by a jury, who are the ultimate arbiters of these sorts of allegations, if these allegations were made in Ohio. Now, not knowing what the limitations period is in Washington, D.C., it's a little less suspect. But if that limitations period is anything less than 26 years, I think that also raises a specter of timing and interest in the motivation of the timing, now that the case can never be judged by anybody but the court of public opinion. And of course, in the Me Too era, that court of public opinion is obviously highly biased in favor of the accuser.
Yeah, no, I mean that's absolutely true, and oftentimes the court of the public opinion is very harsh, and it lasts a long time. We were just talking about I believe it was Harvey Weinstein a few weeks back, and his case was in the public for 2 years, and his actual court dates, they only lasted 6 weeks. So it's almost worse, and you don't get a chance to clear your name. So that is definitely interesting. There is a conflict that we often talk about when we get together and talk about these current issues that are in the news. And, the conflict is usually about, the belief of women, having to believe women right away when they say that they have been harmed or, sexually abused by someone. But then there's the other thing that is really supposed to happen, where it's like innocent until proven guilty. And so that conflict, they definitely fight with each other, I believe. It's just this particular case where, right away the accused is believed to be wrong, and it ruins their lives, whether it's true or not. So can you tell us a little bit more about the tug of war that's happening between those two things?
Absolutely, Erica. The theory put forth by the Me Too movement is grounded in sound socio-demographic research, psychological research, and comes from a genuine desire to encourage the reporting of sexual assault by children, women, men, and anybody that has been through that traumatic event. And historically, all the way up until very recently, the last 4 or 5 years, these sorts of crimes have gone grossly underreported for a variety of reasons: fear, shame, dependency on the assailant. But law enforcement, and also, I guess I should say, law enforcement has historically been notorious about victim shaming through interrogation of the accuser, putting them through a variety of inappropriate and scientifically unsound procedures, putting them in circumstances and asking them about what they were wearing. Did you agree to go home with this person? Were you flirting with them? And things of that nature. So the Me Too movement and the idea that we start by believing a person is well founded. But when we juxtapose it against the fundamental American belief that people should be innocent unless their accuser can prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, is real, and it's dangerous. Joe Biden is himself walking a very fine line between advocating for the belief of women who come forward, disclose allegations of sexual conduct, sexual assault conduct, and other domestic violence incidents. But also putting forth his personal experience of now being falsely accused from his perspective of a sexual assault. And how do we protect those who have been accused outside of the court of law? We have to be open-minded and understand that false allegations are real. By some studies, up to 30 to 40% of allegations are in fact false. Now, we as members of the society have to accept those two perspectives. And in particular, as a criminal defense attorney, I have to understand that there's the court of public opinion and the court of law. And balancing the difference between those two courts is critically important, from the advocacy that we do for our clients in the media, in social media, and in their personal lives with employers and loved ones, to the different arguments that we have to make in a court of law and based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The reality is the world, Erica, is not black and white. It is an infinite number of shades of gray. And that is the real world that we live in. But when we're talking about proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and we're talking about allegations that are as serious as this, as serious as changing the entire course of the history of a country, we should really be leaning towards a much higher level of proof in those circumstances.
I think you're right. And I mean, bringing up reputation and damaging someone's reputation when their future really depends on, you know, what is happening right now, and it depends on them just being a shining light. Basically, you want to have an honest and true president. You know, but we've seen this before. We've seen this in the Trump campaign, but you know, they had things on video. So, and they had a lot of proof. They had a lot of proof that inappropriate things happened. Although, you know, nothing came out in court. You know, for Joe Biden, this isn't going to go to court. So it is just going to be public opinion. What can he do to mitigate this?
Well, Erica, being an accused person is about the most difficult position anybody can ever find themselves in. On the one hand, you want to advocate for your innocence. On the other, you don't want to be looking like you're flinging allegations back at your accuser in an attempt to deflect the allegations from yourself. From Joe Biden's perspective, if I were on Joe Biden's legal team, what I would be looking at is the evidence that's not present. Let's go back and look at those Senate records, and let's demonstrate through the testimony of the people that were present at that time that Ms. Reed never came into the office to make that report. Let's put out in the court of public opinion all of the witnesses from the office that say, well, she never talked about it in this circumstance, the way that she claims she did. Often we're looking to show in the most convincing way possible that the absence of evidence is evidence in and of itself. So when these things that she claims happened didn't happen, we want to prove that. Likewise, we're going to want to remind everybody of Joe Biden's amazing reputation and historical support for women. The question has been asked both on the Daily Podcast and by a variety of commentators on these allegations. If Joe Biden was the type of person who is engaging in this sort of sexual misconduct, why would he be a champion for new laws and regulations that apply only to people elected to Congress, amplifying the investigation of these sorts of allegations, making the filing of these sorts of allegations even easier? It's almost like shooting himself in the foot if he knows that he's the kind of person that's going out and engaging in this kind of behavior. So that sort of anti-self-interest behavior is really important to point out. Pointing out in an individual like Joe Biden's case, he's got myriad of individuals that will testify to his character. Now, on a more local level, you want to roll out the individuals that support the person that's being accused and say, I don't believe that this person would ever engage in that sort of conduct. So building up the community around the accused person and making sure that the court of public opinion is aware of the evidence that demonstrates innocence are critical aspects to defending these sorts of cases in the court of public opinion.
So that's very interesting, and those are very good points, Brian. So if he can start looking up those records and showing people that, just really this fact wasn't true, that fact wasn't true, this fact wasn't true. I mean, it may not completely erase what people are thinking, but at least they can see that possibly if she's lying about these things, she might be lying about the accusation as well.
That's exactly right, Erica. And when we're talking about how my office handles these sorts of defenses, we don't want our client or the accused person putting forth those arguments. We want those arguments and that evidence to come from objective sources outside of our office, so that there can be no allegation of taint, manipulation, or self-interest or self-dealing in presenting that information, which is in Joe Biden's case why it's so great that the New York Times did this thorough investigation of the allegations, because now the New York Times has come out and presented that evidence to the public. Now, to touch on another point that you brought up, Erica, you're absolutely right. Not everybody is going to listen to the evidence. Not everybody is going to believe the evidence. And what I would say doesn't necessarily go to the world of criminal defense, but more is life skills and a mindset that I personally follow and I encourage all of my clients to follow. The people that sling arrows and accusations at you are not presenting a reflection of you back at you. They're presenting a projection of themselves upon you. And you have to be really calm, and you have to be really strong in yourself and your self-belief. And especially so when you're the victim of a false allegation.
I think that truer words could not be said. That is an excellent way to think of it. Well, Brian, those were very powerful words and a great lesson for today. I want to thank you so much for joining us, shedding a little light on this new development in the news for Joe Biden. And, we're wishing him the best. Hopefully he can get past this. I mean, hopefully it's not true. But, and if it isn't, hopefully he can, prove things to the public so that he can move forward in his campaign, with a clean and honest reputation, just as he's built all along.
Absolutely, Erica. I feel for anybody who's in the position of being faced with a false allegation. And of course, there are only two people in the world that know whether this allegation is true or false. But assuming that it is false, and it seems like a lot of the evidence is is supporting the fact that this is in fact a false allegation. I do hope that he's engaging in strong self-care. I hope that he gets through this and that it doesn't ruin his amazing political career.
Absolutely. And no matter what side you're on politically, you really have to look at this like an outsider would, and just as a person in politics with a job, being either accused of something he did, or accused, hopefully he's not being falsely accused and it affects his career. So that's all. That's really what you deal with on a daily basis, whether it's someone that is a candidate for the presidency, or somebody that is out there working their regular job and not able to go back because they're falsely accused of something. I know that you really work hard to help your clients get through that and save their reputation if they are falsely accused, and save their careers and their family. I mean, there's just so many different aspects of it that you are helping them with. And so, we really appreciate the job that you do. I know that your clients do. And thank you again for all of the information. I just want to remind everyone that Brian's office is open. This is an evergreen type webinar, but if you're looking at it now, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and Brian is still in the office working hard every single day, helping his clients. So don't wait to come in and get help. Get help now.
Thank you, Erica. Take care.